Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. You've been listening. We've been talking to business leaders across Asia. And today we have a great gentleman with us who have been connected with me on LinkedIn for some time and he has worked across the world. So we have Charles Brewer with us, Group CEO of POS Malaysia Berhad. He's a global leader. He has worked in the US, UK, Malaysia, Philippines, and also South Africa. And today I'm going to talk to him more about his exploits in Malaysia. Charles, welcome to the show.
You're very welcome, Bob. Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you as well. So for all my guests, I like to ask this first question. What is your favorite Kung Fu movie?
Okay, so I got two. My kids, and thanks to my kids, I love Kung Fu Panda. That is just fantastic. I mean, it's filled with adult humor as well as kid humor. So I absolutely love that. And if I was being a little bit more serious, anything with Bruce Lee, so Enter the Dragon or any of those ones, it's pretty cool.
Thank you, Charles. Kung Fu Panda is a favorite. A lot of guests mentioned it. It has so much wisdom in it.
It's
so many quotes.
I've watched it so many times thanks to my children. And some films I have to go and watch with them I don't really enjoy very much, but that one I enjoy a lot. And as you say, it has many layers, many of which my children don't understand yet. But I particularly like that it appeals to adults as much as to kids. But great films, I should say, not just films, great films.
Thank you, Charles. That is a great choice. So while preparing for this interview, of course, I've done my research and read, the interviews that you've done recently as well. One thing that describes you is you said that you are a straightforward Gap T-shirt wearing CEO.
Yeah,
not
that. Today. Not today. Look, I'm looking very smart today. So
yeah, so like Gap is not that popular in Malaysia, so we don't get that context. But maybe it's something like Uniqlo or something. And why do you say that?
It is, and to give you a couple of scenarios, a couple of examples of why. And today, I flip and flop between being formal or / informal. But when I choose informality, I do it quite deliberately. I do it deliberately in Post Malaysia more than I would have done perhaps in some of my previous roles in Canada Post and with DHL, Deutsche Post DHL, which was significantly more formal in the older days than it is perhaps today, but certainly more formal than I want. So I do it very deliberately, which is, we have a fantastic organization. Post Malaysia is more than 200 years old, and we're very proud of that, very proud of our legacy and our history. But it also needs to transform significantly. So a lot of my journey, all of my journey actually in the last 2 years has been centered and focused around how we transform this fantastic company to be fit for purpose for tomorrow. And to your point, one of the key pieces of our transformation sort of sits around the culture of the organization. So, I wouldn't do it to you now, but if I'd asked you maybe a few years ago to describe Post Malaysia using characteristic words, you probably described it as dusty, old, bureaucratic, slow, government, GLC, and other words like that. I've heard them all. And so as part of our transformation, we're transforming very quickly, we're transforming our culture, how we operate, how we behave, what we think, what we say, what we do. And culture transformation, again, I've been through culture transformation in a number of different companies, and I'm sure you've witnessed it as well. Sometimes culture transformation ends up being a sticker on a cup or a poster or a t-shirt or a baseball cap or whatever it is. Culture transformation is so much more than that, and it's really, really hard to do when you're transforming a 200-year-old company. So culture per se is a function of how I behave. So the culture of Post Malaysia is a function of how I behave. So what my employees, we have 18,000 fantastic Post Malaysia employees. They look to me, they're looking to me to see how I behave and what I do and what I say and how my dance, my song, my story, my narrative, they're looking at me. So very deliberately, when I first came in, and I told my board when I was being recruited, actually, I'm not going to wear a suit, because wearing a suit, shirt and tie plays to that narrative of bureaucratic, slow, not customer centric, not employee centric. So I very deliberately, and encourage all my team too, to be informal, because that's the culture we want. We want a more informal, more inclusive, more dynamic, more exciting, more sexy, use that word lightly, more fun culture. And our customers don't wear suits, so many of our employees don't wear suits. So why would I wear a suit? So with the exception of me when I go to see the minister, or if I'm doing a TV interview, as I was this morning, so I had to look a little bit smarter, I don't wear a suit. I don't always wear the Gap t-shirt. I wear Uniqlo t-shirts too, but I do it because it helps to cascade the environment that I want to create within Post Malaysia. And so it's a little bit different sometimes. Sometimes a polo shirt, sometimes something different, but rarely a suit, shirt and tie, except on very formal occasions.
Thank you for dressing up for this interview as well.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And by the way, I've worn a sort of a slightly smarter outfit the last couple of weeks, and it's really funny. People observe this stuff really quickly. So everywhere I go, people go, "Oh, wow, you're so formal. Have you got a meeting or something?" So I pick and choose a little bit. But like I said, and again, there was this study done, I think it was like 20 or 30 years ago by a cleverer person than me, and he studied baboons, the baboons, and what they observed was that baboons study the alpha baboon every 20 seconds. Every 20 seconds, the baboon will look at the alpha baboon to see what the alpha baboon's doing. Now, I'm not a baboon, by the way, and I don't want to ever be referred to as a baboon, but I think it's very true in life, and especially in a very large organization like Post Malaysia that's going through a significant transformation. My employees are looking at me and my management team to see how we're behaving. Are we being consistent with what we're saying on our t-shirts and what we're saying in public and so on and so forth? So, like I said, culture is a function, fundamentally not a function of t-shirts or posters. It's a function of behavior. So you need to make sure, and I talk about this with my team very, very regularly, that we need to make sure that our song and our dance matches. What we're saying and how we're behaving, there's a match, so people don't see inconsistency. So that's a very long answer to your question, but it's a deliberate reason why I do it.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, I so happen to have a question from a CEO of a GLC who also does not like to wear suits. You might know this gentleman, Shamsuddin, and I actually interviewed him earlier today, and he actually gave me this question that relates to what you just said. He said he's very inspired by all the transformation that you've done. How do you inspire that transformation as a Mat Saleh?
Well, and again, it doesn't matter whether it's transformation of an organization or sustainability transformation or whatever you're trying to transform and whatever you're trying to do as a business leader, CEO or otherwise. I think first and foremost, you have to be particularly passionate about it, and have a lot of energy around that subject, because there's again, I'm sure you're the same. In life, most humans' ability to focus on a singular task is only so much time to be able to do it before they get bored or find something else that's more interesting. So, I think the answer to your question is have a lot of passion around the subject. Take it personally, so that, as I said, you really own it and you really drive it, and have that sort of ability to sustain. So when you start something, you really got to stay focused on sustaining the energy, sustaining the focus, sustaining the inspiration, and sustaining the passion, so that you don't have these sort of dips where people can switch off.
Thank you, Charles. Yes, sustaining is important indeed. So talking to you, and I've seen this in your interviews, I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm, the energy, and you call yourself the Chief Energy Officer.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, I can. And by the way, so I was being asked the other day by somebody who said, you're 58 years old now. How come you're still so energetic? It's just part of my DNA that I'm very lucky that lots of things around me energize me. Talking to you energizes me. So life energizes me. So I'm able to sort of, my family energizes me, So my wife just sent me a picture of my son doing something at home. It energizes me. So seeing my couriers and postmen doing what they're doing when their eyes light up really energizes me. So that where, when the rubber hits the road and you see the sort of the immediate feedback, that helps to energize me. But anyway, to your question, so I stole that phrase from as a great company, and anybody who's listening to this podcast can go and look it up. There's a company called the Energy Factory, which is an American company. It's led by a gentleman by the name of Tony Schwartz. And about 12 years ago now, 10 or 12 years ago now, I was lucky enough to hear him speak. And he introduced this concept to me around energy, managing your energy, knowing where your energy levels are, and the ability, the necessity to find times in your day or your week or your life to re-energize, because certain things hit us during the day that take that sort of smile off of our face, and our shining eyes dim a little bit, and so on and so forth. So anyway, he spent a lot of time talking about sort of understanding your energy levels, understanding trigger points that can send you into your darker space, and I'll talk a bit about that later perhaps. But anyway, he has this phrase saying that the CEO, he introduced this phrase to me saying that the CEO is not the CEO as we would know it. Your purpose in life is to be the energizer of your organization. And it really struck me, and it really struck me. I'm not a brain surgeon, so I'm a generalist, and I'm okay at what I do. But I really, when I thought about his comments and thought about it in terms of what it meant for me, and I was in Asia at the time when I heard this, and it was in the early 2000s, and what resonated with me was, if you're familiar with dragon boat racing, Japanese, Asian dragon boat racing, the little person at the back with the drum, the guy or the girl that hits the drum, and he or she creates the drum beat for the crew. Yeah. So if he goes faster, the crew go faster. If he goes slower, the crew goes slower. Yeah. And what resonated with me is that's my purpose. My purpose is in any organization is to sort of set that drum beat in terms of how fast you want the organization to move, how energized do you want it, and so on and so forth. And when that was point one. Point two that I really resonated with me is that as the CEO, and again going back to the example I gave you earlier, where people look up to you and look at how you're operating, you have a choice in life when you meet any employee or any future employee or a podcast owner. You have a choice in life. I can get on this call and be miserable as sin, and you sit there and do an interview, but it's not very exciting. I can get on this interview and smile. So my interaction with you in the next sort of 25 minutes is how you judge me. And if you bring that back into an organizational perspective, when I get in the lift in the morning, when I get out of my car normally around about 7:30, and I get in the lift in the morning, and as I often do, meet somebody from finance, or somebody from customer service, or somebody from sales, or somebody from operations. It could be the very lowest level. That may be the one time that I meet them this year, or this month, or this week, or this day. But that 10 seconds in the lift, or 30 seconds in the lift, I have my behavior either makes them smile and their eyes light up and makes their day better, or I make their day worse. It's a choice. So I worked out that the culture, again, come back to culture, the culture and sort of the feelings of your employees that you come into contact with is a derivative of what you do. It's completely you. It's not them. It's not the lift. It's not the building. It's not the company they work for. It's you. So I choose, and to your question, I choose wherever I can. I'm not always perfect. I want to stress this, but whenever I can, I choose to create shining eyes. I choose to be the chief energy officer and try and lift their day and make it a little bit better than necessarily make it a bit worse. So that's where it comes from. And I live it as best I can every day. And I have bad days too, but every day I try and remind myself, as I'm pulling into the car park, or I'm pulling into a mail delivery center, or pulling into a parcel center, or visiting customer service, or whatever it may be, or seeing, I try to remember it's a conscious choice. It's a conscious choice about how I behave in those first sort of 20 seconds, 1 minute, 3 minutes, and how I behave, and whether I'm smiling or not smiling, is going to impact the other person. And if you remember that as a CEO or as a leader in general, that you have a conscious choice about what people see, and you have a conscious choice about how you lead them. If you remember that as often as you can, and choose to pick the side of happiness and positivity, you've got a fairly good chance of people around you a little bit happier.
Thank you, Charles. That is so gold. That is so important. And yeah, as a leader, that is very, very important indeed. But I just want to stay on this point. You mentioned something that you said you like to elaborate on. I think it's about managing energy. You said certain things will put you into the dark side of things. So is there a way you manage it? Like, do you focus on the positives? What do you do?
So again, learning this from Tony Schwartz and from the Energy Factory. So there's a number of things you need to be very honest with yourself. Is that, first of all, that you're not always going to feel in the happiest quadrant. If you think about it, sort of like a 2x2, and the top right-hand one being high performance, you're not always going to be in that sort of top right-hand box. Things will throw you out of that into the bottom left-hand corner, which is, you know, sort of stressed, angry, tired, you know, moody, you know. So certain trigger points, you know, first thing to do, and again, for anybody listening, is to work out, be honest with yourself, what sort of things send you to that darker side. So I'll give you, for me personally, yeah. So and my team know this. We've had lots of honest conversations. Today is Friday. It's now 1:20. If my team want to come and talk about something very complex, do it first thing in the morning, not at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, because my head is elsewhere. I'm tired. Had a long week. I've had a busy day doing whatever I'm doing. And if you want to come and have a conversation about the strategy for Post Malaysia for the next 10 years and the financials that go with it, 4 o'clock on a Friday is not the best time to do it. So we have a agreement with my management team that I operate the very best. I'm a morning person. I operate at the very best. My head operates at the very best. I'm in that high performance zone first thing in the morning. So first and foremost, you know, work out the triggers, work out what sort of things can send you the wrong way, and then try and avoid them. You know, manage your time. I mean, you can't always, but you need to manage your day or your week or your month to try and avoid those situations. You know, for example, another one, that's one for me example. I don't operate so well in that context. At 4 o'clock, I'm good at, if somebody wants to have a conversation about life, I can have a conversation about life at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But if you want to show me a 28-page spreadsheet, forget it, you know. So work out sort of what are some of your triggers. The second thing is that situations can send, you know, anybody into the darker side, you know. So for me, it's a little bit around people that are, if you can't articulate the question fairly simplistic. I'm back to the point earlier about my t-shirts. I'm a fairly simple person, so if you want something, tell me and I'll do it, yes or no. You know, it's pretty straightforward. I don't need 45 minutes to cover a 4-minute conversation. So that would be another example. So again, we talk a bit about how to structure our conversation to keep it simple and on point. The third thing is that, given that all of us, and yourself included, you know, all of us are going to go into that sort of space that we don't like so much and where we don't operate at our best. All of us at certain times are going to do it with your family, with your friends, at work. It's always going to happen, and you can't avoid it. There's a really important trick, which is learning how to create renewal time. And what renewal time is, so if you've had a 4-hour board meeting, which is never the most exciting or fun things to do, and then you're going straight from that meeting to another meeting with one of your direct reports, or with the couriers, or with some people that are really important to you and the business, you must make sure you create renewal time between the two meetings so that you can recharge your head. So for me, it's going for a walk around the building. Just outside here, there's a balcony. I can walk around the building and clear my head. It's listening to music. You'll very often find me in my car if my head's not in the right space first thing in the morning, playing some music, could be AC/DC or whatever else, but playing it very loud so that I get myself in a happy space, you know. Or it can be family, or for others it could be shopping, or for others it could be going for a walk in the park. Exercise is another one. So again, if you find yourself in those moments, build in time in your day and in your week and in your weekends to make sure you get that renewal time. Make sure you get that time where you can recharge the battery so that you're ready to go at 100% whenever you're ready to go again. Yeah, so that's a really critical one. And bringing it back into the office space. So, you know, in our management meetings, we've talked about all of these subjects very openly, about how I behave and how they behave and so on and so forth. And if we feel somebody is starting to not be in that high performance zone, we just take a break, go and get a coffee, chill out, talk about football, whatever it may be, refresh, reset, get the head in a better space and go again, because all of us go there for different reasons at a different time. So it's picking up on those obvious and non-obvious clues and saying, okay, time out, let's have a bit of a renewal time. Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. That is so cool. I think I need renewal time as well. And
we all do.
Yeah, I think one thing I picked up from the whole conversation is that you have honest conversations with your team. And that is very interesting to me. So how do you cultivate this culture of like openness in your team?
So I mean, to the first point, it is really, trust is a critical component of any organization. Trust with you and your board, trust between you and your management team, trust between you and your organization, trust with your family. So trust is really important. Trust is the foundation of happier employees. If you look at statistically, what creates high engagement levels from any employee environment or at home for that matter, trust is a really big one. And that trust comes from a place of honesty. If you want to build trust, if I want to build trust with you, me being honest is a great, and open, and very open, is a great way to build trust. And if you don't have that honesty and openness, then you see through it in 2 seconds flat. Some of my employees, if I stand in front of them and say, I'm going to lose 20 kilos next week, they know I'm talking nonsense, and it's not going to build trust. And that lack of honesty breaks that trust down, and you have disengaged employees. And that's a loose example, but if you look at the history of post-Malaysia and the history of leadership in post-Malaysia, I think we haven't always been quite as honest as we should be with our employees about where we are as an organization, what we need to focus on, how they play their part, what they can do to help us get to where we want to get to. And if you don't have that level of openness and honesty, then how do they buy into and become fully engaged in the path to greatness, hopefully? So similarly, like you just said, with my management team, we have our regular management meetings like anybody else, but it's always honest and always transparent. And to your question, how do you do that? By doing it yourself. So if I as the CEO wasn't being honest and not being transparent and not being open, it's unlikely they will do too. I do want to stress that culturally, and like you said at the start, I've worked all around the world, thankfully, and very fortunate to have done so. But the ability to cultivate honesty and openness is sometimes more challenging in some environments than others. So in Europe, it's okay to be very direct and very honest. Where I came from and my upbringing, we celebrate being open, honest, and direct, sometimes to a fault. But as you know, in Asia, and particularly to your point earlier about being a Matsale, culturally, he's the boss, he's a Matsale, I better just do what he says. So and it's not a culture I want. So how do you change that? You just have to keep going, like I said earlier. So start with yourself, start with how you behave, with how you operate, and eventually majority follow suit. And so I think about how we started our life in post-Malaysia with my management team to where we are now. It's chalk and cheese. When we first started, it was just silence and just do what stay below the radar. In fact, when I wrote down, this is true, when I wrote down where we were culturally as an organization, I said we have a culture of fear. The organization was more scared of the CEO and internal audit than they were of our competitors and our customers. And that's if you're worried internally, you can't possibly be excited externally. So if I think back to where we were then 2 years ago to how we are now, it's really changed quite considerably. But to your point, it's by evidencing it yourself and also calling out when people don't. If people sort of are holding back, you've got to sort of be a bit honest and say, hey, Charles, come on, or whoever it is, I need you to tell me what you're really thinking. I was doing it just earlier this week. I could tell one of my team weren't happy about something and they clearly hadn't felt comfortable in sharing it. So I just sat down with them over a coffee and said, come on, tell me what's in your head. And it all came out, so you've got to keep going. Nothing's perfect, but be consistent, you've got to have that strength, that inner strength of wanting to keep going and do the right thing.
Thank you, Charles. And I really resonate with that. The best way to build trust is to be open and honest, and even sharing some vulnerability, like sharing that. Just now you said, I'm not 100% all the time. That shows your honesty there. So that is very excellent indeed.
Sure.
So yeah, you've been in post-Malaysia for 2 years, and a lot of things that you said, the cultural transformation, all the initiatives you're doing, the green transformation, so many things that you've been doing for the past 2 years. So can you share with us some of the challenges you had and some of the changes that you've made?
Yeah, sure. So, again, I think it's again, the spirit of honesty. When I came back in August, I knew this is my third time living in Malaysia, and I've been in logistics all of my life. So I knew who Post Malaysia was. I met Post Malaysia previously when I worked here working for DHL. So, I already had a bit of an appreciation of perhaps what I was going to walk into. But the reality is that, whether you look at whether you look at where our brand was, whether you look at where our culture was, whether you look at our safety, whether you look at employee engagement, whether you look at our service level, whether you, for parcel or mail, if you looked at any element of our business, it wasn't particularly healthy, and for lots of reasons. I mean, I hasten to add, I don't have any pixie dust that I carry around with me. It's for, these things don't happen because somebody deliberately does it. But the fact is that Post Malaysia has had a particularly checkered, last sort of 4 or 5 years. We've had a fantastic 200 years, and people like, when I first arrived back in Malaysia and I was doing my quarantine and I was bored out of my brain and my children were driving me bonkers in the hotel room, I decided to ring 300 customers who had left us to ask them why, and to listen to what they were saying. But so I spent a lot of time sort of trying to uncover, what were our employees thinking, what were our customers thinking, where were we going wrong? And it was really insightful in terms of some of the obvious things that we could fix. So as I said, there were a rake of things that we needed to fix quite quickly. And like, I think that the mandate from the board when they hired me was to transform Post Malaysia. That was fundamentally the sort of mandate in terms of what they asked me to do. But it's hard. One of the things that I spent quite a bit of time on right at the start was saying, look, it's a bit, my football team is Arsenal. We've had 8 years of depressing results, or 10 years now of depressing results. And when Mikel Arteta came in, you can't suddenly say, okay, we're going to win the Premier League. You've got to have milestone or achievements. So with Post Malaysia, for us, that strategy looked like, before we could move forward and really transform Post Malaysia, we needed to fix the basics and get the basics right. So we needed to make sure what we picked up, we delivered on time. When people rang our customer service, we answered the call, just we billed customers correctly. You can go through, as I said, a long list of things that we needed to fix before we could move forward. So get the foundation of the house right. So to give you a few examples, when I came in August 21, our mail delivery performance was around 48-49% on time, which is awful. And our parcel delivery performance was around 52-53%, which is also awful. And then we were sitting there wondering why customers weren't loving us. If you don't, it's like going to a restaurant and you order a nasi lemak and the rice isn't cooked. That's the core part of what they do, is the food. It doesn't matter what the sign says or the manager's like or the glass of water's like. If your core purpose, the food in a restaurant, isn't very good, you aren't going back. And in our business, the core part of our business is that we pick up and deliver on time. That's the core part of the business. So as I said, it wasn't so good, and it was no sort of late 40s, early 50s for mail and parcel. So as I say, the first part of our strategy was really about fixing those basics. And I have to say that for the most part, the team have done an outstanding job. So our parcel performance now, as I sit here today, I see it live every day, is now running at 96% next day delivery, which is the best in Malaysia by any carrier, which is fantastic. Our mail performance, our mail delivery performance, is now running at about 94-95% on time, which is fantastic compared to where it was. Our employee engagement is now 86%, so 86% happy, which is fantastic. Our NPS, our Net Promoter Score in retail, is now at 87%, so 87% happy customers coming into our retail point. So whichever dimension you look at across people, service, customer, and profit, we've made significant strides. But of course, still much to do. We got a long road ahead of ourselves in terms of how we want to transform Post Malaysia. But in terms of fixing the nasi lemak, we've done a pretty good job of fixing the nasi lemak. Now we need to start serving some other condiments and other food types to make sure that we de-risk the reliance on nasi lemak. So we're working really hard on a number of other activities that will take Post Malaysia forward.
Thank you, Charles. That is very impressive indeed. I like the point where you said you called all the customers that left you. So
it was fascinating. So just on that point, if you listen to my sales team, when I asked my sales team, so why do we have this high attrition rate? They would say, oh, price. Salespeople always say price. It's number one that comes out of their mouth. So every country in the world, by the way. So they said price, they said this, they said. When I rang the customers, the 300 customers, and my Bahasa is not great, and their English sometimes wasn't great, but I kind of worked it out. The number one reason for them was lack of performance service. So the service was poor, which was evidenced by the number I just told you, so which is true. And your salespeople rarely come and see me, whereas the competition are hungrier. So it really helped. Again, when we were developing the strategy, talking to those 300 customers, I spent at least the first 45 days, 50 days traveling around every part of Malaysia, meeting with our postmen and our couriers and listening to what their observations were, meeting as many more customers as I could meet. It just helps you it takes away, if you come into a postal organization, the sort of opportunities and challenges for Post Malaysia are not hugely different from Australia Post or Sing Post or Viet Post or Indonesia Post or Royal Mail or anybody else. So they're pretty consistent, mail declining, parcel growing. But the nuances of Malaysia, nuances of what we were doing well and what we were doing, in this case, wrong, are quite different. So I think it really helped me take the blinkers off and take my perceptions and biases off and really concentrate on, okay, what are the 4, 5, 6 things that are really annoying our customers?
Thank you, Charles. Yes. Yeah, I'm a user of Post Laju. I love using it. It's quite very reliable. I use it to send documents and things to my family. And yeah, that is the nasi lemak, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned the condiments as well. So what are you excited about in the near future? What are the condiments that are coming up?
Oh, loads of things. So like I said, our core business is mail, parcel, retail. That's what we do as a core business. But we have many other strings to our bow that we already have, and some that are new. So we have, I'm guessing you, perhaps even yourself, but certainly many of your listeners won't know that we have a number of subsidiaries. So one is Post Aviation. So every time you get on a Malaysia Airlines aircraft, that food is made by my team. We make 11,000, I wish it was 11 million, 11,000 meals we make a day for the airlines. So all that food that you eat, the peanuts, everything else comes out of our shop lot,
including the nasi lemak.
Yes, actually,
Yeah.
you can do back. Yeah, so
Yes.
and actually, it's really good. They're famous. So it's called Post Aviation. They're really famous for their cheesecake. They make a really great cheesecake. So that one gets a lot of requests. So and then we have an air freight arm in Post Aviation, some cargo handling, the ticketing at the desk. Quite often is asked. The people, when you walk down the air bridge to get on the plane, the person controlling that is us. So we have a whole business there, which is a fantastic business, doing really, really well. That can do much more, by the way. We have another division called Post Logistics, which we own 2 ships that we move coal from Indonesia to Malaysia and other countries. And we do warehousing and air freight and ocean freight and all sorts of things there. So that's a really exciting business that is going through its own transformation as we speak. We have DigiCert, which is a whole digital arm of our business. So we have many other subsidiaries that, quite honestly, a lot of my 2 years have been taken up with writing the sort of core Post Malaysia business, but now we're quickly switching to how do we leverage and grow those subsidiaries at a rapid rate. And then back in Post Malaysia, we have a number of different things going on at the moment that are quite exciting. So one that gets quite a lot of social noise is we have 636 retail points across Malaysia, where we have about 1.2 million people come into our retail points every day to do road tax, insurance, send a parcel, send a letter, whatever it may be, buy stamps, and lots of other things. And that's a fantastic footprint. It's a unique footprint. Nobody else has that footprint in Malaysia. So we're testing a number of new activities in those in that retail footprint. So, for example, we just about 2-3 months ago launched Post Shop, which is a convenience store. So we now have an F&B convenience store. They have great, I don't know if you call it soft ice cream, but great soft ice cream, the one that comes out of the machine. And and we sell Post Aviation's cheesecake there as well. So that we just opened the first one of those to test the concept. It's in a post office, so you can do all of the activities you were doing before, but now you can go and get an ice cream as well, or get your bread, or get your whatever you want to get. And we'll be rolling that out across a number of other locations across Malaysia. So, really transforming our retail points to become what we call community hubs, or Desini, we call it, where you can come there for F&B. We're looking at things like banking, medical services, prescription delivery, and many other bits besides, in terms of what we can do in our existing. We have about 3.2 million square foot of retail space, which makes us one of the biggest retailers in Malaysia. But today historically, we've just done the sort of historical things. Now we want to start doing some very new things, so that we keep the 1.2 million people we have and get another 1.2 million people coming in. So that's pretty cool. We have 2 or 3 other that future value creators. So we have fulfillment. So companies who sell their products are looking to place products closer to their customer, and we have a lot of warehouse space across Malaysia. So leveraging that retail and warehouse space to locate product, and when you order something, you just pull it from the warehouse and then we deliver it. That's the second one. Third one is international, which has just gone live in the last 4 weeks, where we're starting to sell an international product, which is sort of a hybrid between express and post. But it's going really well. And then the fourth one we're exploring very early days is looking at, we have a fantastic digital team that do some really clever stuff, and they do it for Post Malaysia. Now we're looking at, okay, whether we should start offering that as a software as a service to other consumers and other companies in Malaysia. So all of those things, and there'll be more, by the way, that's just 4 that we're working on right now, but all of those things are trying to achieve 2 things. Future value creators, so things that create value for Post Malaysia for the next 200 years. So deliver a bottom line impact, and also de-risk the reliance on our sort of traditional products, which we still love, by the way, but de-risk the reliance on mail and parcels. So just creating those extra condiments, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles. That sounds exciting indeed. And I would say this, thank you for being on the podcast. It has been a story of transformation, and very good to hear it. It's very refreshing and very energizing. So I would say you are the Mikel Arteta of Post Malaysia. So I'll end it. I'll end with this question. The last question I'll ask you, since the season just started. So what are Arsenal's chances of winning the league?
That's unfair, Bob. I'm hugely biased. I've been an Arsenal fan my entire life. I think it's a little bit like Post Malaysia. That we still have lots of challenges, and there's risk. I don't know if you saw the first match against when we played Nottingham Forest last weekend. We played the best football on the pitch by miles. Like Post Malaysia has the best service. We had the best striker, the best defence, best midfield, best goalkeeper, but we still nearly lost it. So I think it's a little bit similar to Post Malaysia. We need to be very consistent and keep doing what we're doing and do it really well. But like Post Malaysia, I'm ever the optimist. We almost made it last year as Arsenal, and I'm very hopeful that we'll minimally be challenging this year, but I'd love to go one step further. Let's see where it ends up.
Yes, love to see that as well. Thank you, Charles, for being on the pod, and thank you for that honest answer about Arsenal just now.
You're very welcome, my friend. No problems.
Thank you, Charles.